So if I can ask you to please give a warm welcome to Jeremy Doherty.
Thank you, everybody. Hello. Lovely to see you all. Good evening. Welcome to tonight's talk as part of the Edinburgh Science Festival. We are genuinely delighted to see you all and to see such a great crowd as well. As you've just been told, my name is Jeremy Doherty. I am Arup's Edinburgh office leader. And it's my pleasure to introduce both tonight's talk and our very, very special guest speaker. We at Arup have been proudly supporting the Edinburgh Science Festival for around 15 years now, and every year delivering the Arup Lecture. With every year comes a new theme for the festival, and with that, a fresh provocation for us to consider as part of our work. Arup is an independent collective of engineers, planners, designers, and technical specialists. We operate globally, and through our work, we aim to create safe, resilient, and regenerative places that enable current and future generations to thrive. We are a creative and innovative community of members that is enabled by our employee-owned structure that is wholly committed in the pursuit of helping to shape a better world. This year's theme of Spaceship Earth really resonated acutely, given the myriad of issues that we face in an increasingly connected and increasingly volatile world with resources that are, at best, limited. We use our skill and imagination to proactively respond to these challenges across multiple sectors: property, energy, infrastructure, increasingly digital, climate and sustainability. Whether that be on our work on the Queensferry crossing over the Forth, the V&A in Dundee, developing active travel plans for the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, developing our distributed heat and energy networks for the rest of the UK, the St Pancras Renaissance Hotel, the Sagrada Familia, and the Sydney Opera House. We are focused on helping to shape a more sustainable and better world. And it is with that lens that we asked tonight's speaker to join us and deliver this year's Arup Lecture. Dame Jo de Silva has earned global recognition as an engineer who has applied her knowledge and design expertise to improve safety, promote inclusivity, and enhance the sustainability and resilience of buildings, infrastructure, communities, and cities. Jo is currently the Global Sustainable Development Leader at Arup and has been awarded the Dame Commander by the British Empire for services to engineering and international development, the Gold Medal by the Institution of Structural Engineers for her work in resilience, and is a Royal Designer for Industry. Tonight's talk will be followed by a Q&A session, and I hope that you'll get involved in that. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dame Jo de Silva.
Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving me such a warm welcome. I feel a bit of a fraud as an engineer talking at a science festival, particularly when I saw some of the other speakers earlier in the week. I'm a big fan of scientists. They're deep thinkers, and their quest is to understand and make sense of our world. Whereas us engineers, we're doers. We seek to apply that scientific knowledge to solve practical problems and create solutions. And that's what we do at Arup. Shaping a better world is our purpose. And I want to talk today about what that means to us, but hopefully to make you think a little bit about what does that mean to you? We face critical challenges and we need to create the future together. But briefly, for those not familiar with Arup, I just want to elaborate a bit on what Jeremy said. My husband, who works in IT, refers to Arup as the Apple or the Google of the built environment, but we're not as well known. We are an extraordinary firm because we were founded by an extraordinary man, Ove Arup. Pictured here in his bow tie on the site of the Sydney Opera House, he was a Dane, a philosopher, an engineer. He believed in the role of engineers and businesses was to contribute to society. Social usefulness, technical excellence, integrity in our relationships are aims that he set out, and they remain equally relevant to all of us today. he talked about the importance of remembering that we're designing for people. I became an engineer because I wanted to make a difference in the world, not because I wanted to take apart my dad's car engine. You know, I like the creativity, but I like the outcome in terms of improving people's lives. He also foresaw in 1971 that we'd need to consider the ecological consequences of our actions and decisions. As Jeremy said, we're a global firm, we're independent, but what people don't know about us is that we're owned by trusts, and the beneficiaries of those trusts are the employees. We're like a giant cooperative, a global cooperative of 18,000 people. Not only engineers, planners, and architects, but 150 different types of technical specialists, from economists to ecologists, acousticians, social scientists. And whilst Arup has been in Edinburgh since 1960, which is longer than I've been on this planet, we're also in 95 other cities around the world. And last year, we delivered projects in 140 countries. So we're a big force, and we want to be a force for good. I believe that's why Ove set up the firm. And when we say our purpose is shape a better world, we really mean it. We think hard about what does better mean. And that changes. It's not a static thing. Because better is something that we understand within the context of society. But we also think about what is our unique role in shaping that better world. We can't do everything. We can't do it alone. In fact, I don't think you can do very much alone. The best things in life are usually done with other people. But I'd like to start by inviting you to think backwards. Go back to 2000. Where were you? It's the whole of my daughter's lifetime. How old were your children? Were you born? Much has changed in the last 25 years. Then global population was 6.2 billion people. Today it's 8.2 billion. And there's another 2 billion more people predicted over the next few decades. We weren't an urban species. That didn't happen until 2006, when we got to the point where 50% of the population in the world lived in cities. The UK was a member of the EU then. We're not now, but 13 other countries are. And those of you who were around in 1999 will remember that we were all very worried that Y2K threatened technological disruption. It didn't really materialize. More disruption has been caused by the iPhone that was launched in 2007, which has become a pervasive technology. And those of us who are parents are grappling with the impact on our children's lives and our own, while looking in anticipation at a future that's like to be radically changed by AI. Climate change was on the agenda in 2000. The Kyoto Protocol was signed in 1997. But it wasn't until the Paris Agreement in 2015 that all the countries in the world agreed that we need to limit global average temperature increases to no more than 1.5 above pre-industrial levels. The window of opportunity to achieve that is closing very fast. So how much of everything that's happened in the last 25 years was inevitable, predictable, preventable? What might you have done differently had you known what you know now? My point is, the future is fiction. A better world is ours to imagine and create. My friend Michael Paulin refers to this attitude in his excellent book, Flourish, as being a possibilist. You decide on the future you want, and then you collaborate and work on actually bringing that future about. We, of course, at the same time, have to navigate the inevitable turbulence, uncertainty, and complexity that the late theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking predicted would define this century. And each of us in this room, as individuals, our organizations, our networks, our relationships, has agency to shape a better world. You all have a role to play. Not on your own, but by joining hands with others, fighting for the same values, through radical collaboration that delivers systemic change. Let's start by imagining a better world. What does better actually really mean? Mostly, people think about it subjectively, in terms of improvement. Where am I now? What's an improved or superior future state that I could get to? People coming from very different cultures, with access to different resources and services, have very, very different views about what better looks like. At a personal level, it might well relate to your families, health, security, standard of living, having more time. But what does it mean for society or humanity in the context of a better world? This pyramid represents Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure lots of you are very familiar with. The important thing is that better starts at the bottom with our ability to meet our most basic needs for food, for water, for clean air to breathe, housing to protect us from the environment, provide a safe place to sleep and to raise our families. I've learned that working in post-disaster situations where people have nothing, or in informal settlements where they have rudimentary houses and really struggle every day to put food on the table. But most of us, and probably most of us in this room, on a day-to-day basis, take these systems which underpin human health and well-being for granted, whilst others don't have that luxury. By 2030, over 2 billion people, that's almost a quarter of the world's population then, will live in slums or substandard housing. In the UK, 3% of families use food banks on a regular basis. 10% of the population already are living in poor quality housing. And the increase in housing costs and cost of living over recent years mean there are 4.3 children, which is 30% of all the children in the UK living in poverty. Better means creating a better world for all of them, particularly those who are vulnerable or less fortunate than us. But better can also imply something else. If you go and get a card for someone that's sick that says, "Get better soon," you're hoping that they're going to recover quickly. You're hoping that they're resilient and that whatever's happened to them won't be lasting, and that they'll regenerate and they'll get their lives back on track. A better world in this context is more than about improved health and well-being and human needs. It's about recovery and resilience. And resilience has been a big part of my work, and it's the ability of cities, businesses, and communities to survive, to recover, to adapt, to thrive, whatever happens. An economic recession, pandemics, extreme weather events, chronic pollution, and more, all of these things happen. But we need to perpetuate, we need to keep on going. You've probably referred to a friend or a family member who's recovering from loss or from illness as being resilient. We inherently know what it is. And as parents, we raise our children to be resilient. We send them on play dates so they create social networks. We give them pocket money so they learn to manage finance. We teach them how to eat healthy food so that they build up physical resilience. And actually, it's very similar when you're looking at the resilience of cities, which this wheel on the right is about. And the work that we did identified that there are 22 things that contribute to the resilience of all cities around the world. Of course, they matter more or less, depending on where that city is. But these 22 things are really important. They're determinants of the health of the city, and they're things that we need to pay attention to. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are another version of a better world. They were published in 2015, and they're actually based on global consultation that involved about 5 million people, and I was one of them. They provide a blueprint for what a better world might look like, where everyone has enough food and drinking water, housing, education, and healthcare is affordable. An opportunity is created through access to energy, transport, and jobs, all as part of a thriving net zero circular economy. We can get there if we do it together. And development is how we get to a better world, not by standing still, or going backwards. It's about improving lives and economic prosperity, reducing inequity and poverty. And sustainable development is doing all of that while ensuring that we're not compromising the ability of future generations to prosper. I think about it as saying everything I do, thinking about a 1, 3, 10, 30, 100-year horizon. Are there consequences of what I'm doing now that are going to create negative consequences in 3, 10, 30, 100 years? In Arup, we're committed to sustainable development. My job for the last 5 years has been helping everyone in Arup understand what it is and make sure that it's actually central to our work. And I created this diagram to help explain the goals to Arup, because 17 is just too many, and it's a funny number anyway. I think it's a prime number. Where we have most impact is where our skills are: energy, water, industry, cities, goals 6, 7, 9, and 11. But the change that we've created in Arup is that we go about doing that whilst at the same time worrying about goals 12 through 15, which are about responsible consumption and life on land and sea and climate change. And we're also thinking about the outcomes for society. Are we improving lives, reducing poverty, improving health? Are we creating a fairer society as well as a cleaner, greener society? Are we helping people get jobs and education? This is why I'm here. Because how can you possibly refuse an invitation to talk at a festival where the theme is Spaceship Earth, particularly if you grew up on Star Trek like I did, and at the age of sort of 15, 16, science fiction was really what I loved the most. It's a perfect analogy for the situation we're in. Today, Spaceship Earth is home to 8.2 billion people. That's 2 billion passengers more compared to 1972. And there's going to be 3 times as many passengers compared to 1972 by the time we get to 2080, when the UN predicts that there are going to be 10.2 billion people on the planet. Problem is, we've only got one planet, one spaceship. This blue-green marble hurtling through space, photographed by the crew of Apollo 17, represents the finite resources we have available to sustain the needs of everyone, now and into the future. This includes natural resources, of course, which we rely on for everything from food, medicine, and clothing, as well as the mineral resources essential for construction and industry. Prior to the 1970s, there were enough supplies on board Spaceship Earth to meet the needs of everyone every year. But that isn't the case any longer. Our planet's no longer able to keep up, no longer able to regenerate resources as fast as all these passengers consume them each year. We're currently using the equivalent of 1.7 Earths. And if we carry on at this rate, and the positive side of it is that we're raising people out of poverty so they're consuming more, we're going to end up needing 3 planets by 2050. That's a jolly big overdraft. Theoretically, Spaceship Earth needs to be resupplied this year on the 13th of August, and that date gets earlier every year. So the challenge we've got is, how do we improve or maintain quality of life for everyone whilst reducing that ecological footprint? If you look at this diagram, the spots in blue and sort of orangey red are countries in America, Europe, and the Middle East. They've got the highest standard of living, which is the bottom axis. But you'll see on the right-hand axis that they're consuming as much as 8 Earths. Whereas countries in Africa, for instance, which are yellow, have a much lighter footprint, but much lower standards of living. And what we really need to do is get all these dots into that little box in the bottom right-hand corner. And you'll note there's only one dot there at the moment, and that's Cuba. Cuba's a great place. Rather than everyone having more and using more, perhaps we need to think a bit more about what constitutes enough. I'm looking around the audience to see if any of you grew up with rationing in the war. When we didn't have too much, We learned to do with enough. I wasn't around then, by the way. But we do want to create a fairer, as well as that safer, cleaner, greener world. And the key to reducing our collective footprint is really simple. We just need to switch from a linear economy to a circular economy. Currently, our whole paradigm is based on take, make, and dispose. Here's my pen. The resources came from planet Earth. It was made into a pen. I'll use this pen, and then it'll run out of ink, and then I'll throw it away. It's actually a recyclable pen. But the point is, that's the mentality. We design and build buildings, and 20 years later knock them down and build another one in the same spot. It's ludicrous. We use all kinds of stuff that we don't need to. We create waste we don't need to. The only place that I've ever been where there is no waste is a refugee camp. Because when people haven't got anything, everything is useful. Every single bit of anything, even a bit of copper wire that long, gets picked up off the floor and used for something. A circular economy is based on reducing consumption through reuse, repair, replacing critical components, recycling, and using renewable materials. Creating a system that keeps materials and products in circulation. And that reduces the need for extraction. It enables nature to flourish. It's also vital to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with extraction, manufacturing, and transportation of materials. But the second challenge is represented here by this wonderful graphic. Our planet is unwell. I'm quoting Professor Johan Rockström, who earlier this week was awarded the Edinburgh Medal, and some of you may have been lucky enough to hear him talk yesterday. The science is unequivocal. The Earth systems that make our planet habitable are changing. This includes our climate. We hear a lot about that. We hear less about the reduction in fresh water, biodiversity, the phosphates and nitrates that regulate biochemical flows, and the ozone layer that protects us from UV radiation. The planet's unwell because since the Industrial Revolution, socioeconomic activity, which you can see on the right, has increased exponentially. And lo and behold, on the right-hand side, the negative impact on the health of the planet has also increased exponentially. And this is the problem. We are the problem. Professor Rockström's work focuses on 9 planetary boundaries. When he first published them, he'd only assessed 3 of them, and now all 9 have been assessed. 6 of them have been crossed. These 9 boundaries represent the critical systems that regulate the stability and the resilience of the Earth systems. If I return to the analogy of Spaceship Earth, it's the life support systems that make our spaceship habitable. The water supply, the heating and cooling, the ventilation, and the plants that we brought on board. The planetary boundaries provide a health check for our planet. It's a bit like us going to the doctor and having our BMI, our blood pressure, cholesterol, and heart rate measured. The challenge for humanity, just as for us individually, is to stay healthy within a safe operating zone. We'll have a greater chance of heart attacks, cancer, and premature death if we're not in good health. Likewise, as the planetary boundaries are breached, we risk reaching tipping points, such as the melting of the Greenland ice sheet or the Gulf Stream changing. And we're not sure what will happen next, just as we're not sure what happens to people after they've had a heart attack. But it's likely that environmental conditions that have been conducive to human life on this planet for around, I can't, there are too many noughts in this, millions of years, will falter and break down. And 6 of those 9 boundaries have already been breached. And we're seeing the symptoms in terms of extreme weather events, which are increasing, reduced crop yields, water scarcity. And our tendency has been to focus on one of these boundaries, climate change. But in truth, they're all interrelated. And it's really important to realize that nature loss is as important as climate change. Nature. What is nature? Nature is biodiversity. It's all the living things on this planet, but it's also the things which they depend on: the land, the soil, fresh water, oceans, air. I grew up in a world that was full of insects, birds, and wild animals. And over the last 50 years, and I'm older than that, there has been a staggering 70% decline in biodiversity. 70% decline. It's because of changes to land use. 75% of the planet's land surface and 66% of the marine environment has been significantly altered by human activity. We've overexploited resources, consumed too much, including groundwater. We've polluted the oceans and the rivers with nitrates from fertilizer and the outflows from heavy industry. And all of that has then been compounded by climate change, which is pushing species beyond their limits of adaptation and destroying ecosystems. Extreme events, weather events are destroying ecosystems. Wildfires are burning down forests. If we're going to limit global average temperatures to no more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, we also need to restore nature. Nature can solve about 25% of the problem by the carbon it absorbs through the forests and the carbon it absorbs through soil, healthy land. Restoring nature also builds resilience to the impacts of climate change by absorbing water and reducing heat. And restoring nature provides the resources future generations are going to need to live on this planet. So, at this point, just to recap, climate change is metaphorically the tip of an iceberg. It's a symptom of our planet being unwell. So is nature loss. We also only have the finite resources of one planet to support another 2 billion people over the next few decades. Everyone needs enough, and enough starts with clean air, water, food, shelter, housing. Inequity, as pictured here, is part of the polycrisis we face. A better world means meeting the needs of everyone and addressing unsustainable patterns of consumption and urbanization. And that brings us back to Arup's purpose, to shape a better world. How? We do it through our work with our clients and our partners, working alongside other consultants. Sometimes they're also our competitors. And through our work, we strive to create safe, resilient, and regenerative places that will enable current and future generations to thrive. We deliver almost 20,000 projects in 140 countries each year. And collectively, that can have an impact. But one project that isn't striving to do that purpose is letting the rest of those 18,000 people down. And so we're a collective. We've made a decision that this is the direction we want to point. And we're holding each other to account to make sure we do that. I want to share with you some of the really exciting things we're doing. And what excites me about this is that 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been doing any of these projects. This is how we're changing. And when I started this job, there was a project which I feel a bit naughty mentioning, but it was a flat. It was called 1 Hyde Park Corner in London. And it was designed by a very famous architect, who wanted to come and work with Arup as the engineers. And I reviewed this project, and I said, I'm struggling. Can you tell me, how is this shaping a better world? I said, you've got a week. And they came back with some flaky argument. And so we didn't do the project. And there's quite a few projects that fall into that category. And that's what it means to be a purpose-led organization. It means putting your purpose at the heart of everything you do. So the starting point, and it is the starting point, is energy transition. This is the most important thing. Unless we phase out fossil fuels and transition to clean energy, there won't be a sustainable future for any of us. It will be out of reach. A global energy transformation is absolutely central to addressing the climate crisis, and it's well underway. Energy accounts for 3/4 of total greenhouse gas emissions. And although at the moment, renewable energy only represents 12% of the total energy supply, and that's the latest figures from the International Energy Association, that's going to increase to 22% by 2030 and 50% by 2050, based on current projections. But we need to go faster because we need to get to 70% by 2050 if we're going to stay within 1.5 degrees and get to net zero. Clean energy investment is already twice the amount spent on fossil fuel investment. That's good news. And it's because wind and solar and hydroelectricity are now cheaper per gigawatt or per watt in most parts of the world than power generated through fossil fuels. So I don't really care that Trump says drill, baby, drill, because actually he's a businessman and he should know that if something is cheaper, people will go down the route of cheaper. So that's where it's going to be. You know, solar, hydro, wind, geothermal, this is where the future is. In fact, energy from onshore wind projects is on average 52% lower than the cheapest fossil fuel-fired options. But those onshore wind projects aren't happening because of NIMBYism. But we have to put our own personal interests aside and realize we are just one person in the whole of humanity. And there are 10, well, at the moment, 8 billion other people. And solar power is an average of 30% lower. And so that's worth doing too. And I've got solar panels on my house now. It took me 3.5 years to get them because I had to go head to head with my local council who said you can't have solar panels in a conservation area. After I'd written them letters explaining that as a local council they had net zero targets and I was doing my bit to help the targets, we eventually got the panels. I feel so strongly about the need to get out of fossil fuel. We persuaded our previous chair, Alan Belfield, to stand up at COP26 down the road in Glasgow and announce that we were not going to pursue any more energy commissions from April 22 that supported the extraction, refinement, or transportation of hydrocarbon-based fuel. We just said, we're not doing it anymore. Other people can do it. But the reason we said it is because we wanted to just put all our energy and effort into this energy transition. We wanted our engineers to grow up with the skills to be brilliant renewable energy engineers in the future, not to be working in sectors of the energy market where they weren't going to have jobs in the future. The exception is the manufacture of hydrogen because we consider that one part of the transition to the net zero future. And you kind of have to do some blue hydrogen to work out how to do it all before you get the green hydrogen and there's enough green energy around. Rather than having negative financial implications, it's actually provided the focus to transform our business. It's attracted talented leaders to join us who want to be part of the solution, not the problem. And it's bringing exciting new opportunities. I love this picture. This is combining ground engineering skills, geotechnical skills, and digital skills to unlock 2 gigawatts of offshore generation just off the 100 kilometers off the shore of Holland. And the water's very deep, and they need this energy to power 2 million homes. And what we're doing is analyzing the seabed to understand where you can put the wind turbines, and that will enable the Dutch government to actually lease the opportunity to develop those sites to wind farm companies. This is the first hillside solar wind farm in the Philippines. The Philippines really wants to use solar energy, but most of the flat land is used for agriculture. And so the solution was to do this and use artificial intelligence and machine learning to make the most of the undulating terrain, to optimize where the panels go. Conversely, in Australia, there isn't any shortage of flat land. And there we've managed to build a massive solar farm of 5,000 hectares. And the best thing about it is it's right bang next door to a substation between New South Wales and Queensland. And in Tonga, in the Pacific Islands, we've worked with them to develop a national strategy that uses a mix of wind, solar, and biomass, and will enable them to get off their diesel generators, which are currently responsible for 80% of their energy supply. And we're working with individual companies too, who want to meet their net zero targets. GSK, or a big pharmaceutical firm in Spain, asked us to put solar panels all over their roofs and canopies over the car parks so they could generate enough of their own renewable energy and eliminate their dependence on the grid. But all this renewable stuff is tricky because the sun doesn't shine all the time and the wind doesn't blow regularly. And so you get all this intermittent power, which has to be, you have to do something with it. If you've got too much, if the wind's really blowy, where do you put it? This photo may not be exciting, but it was very innovative technology, I'm told, to create this vast battery storage unit. And that meant that the 24,000 panel solar farm that this serves for North Island water has become very significantly more efficient. I heard about this story. I actually bothered to understand what was going on in my basement with the battery. I bought another one. And my energy bills have reduced. So I like doing these things, experimenting personally and linking up to these much bigger scale projects. In Scotland, though, we're doing a lot of pumped hydropower projects. And we're actually making the most of what nature provided, all those beautiful lochs up in the sky, in the hills. And you can pump all the water up there, and it stays there, or catch the water, and then you release it when you need it. Excellent energy storage. And the project that I really like is the one on Loch Kemp Reservoir. And we've extended that reservoir, we've connected it to Loch Ness, we've built 8 dams, a number of tunnels, and all of that is this big complex system. And it's providing the energy, the storage we need, 600 megawatts. And hydrogen is another way of storing energy. And that's really coming into its own in industry, aviation, and shipping, because you can move it around. Another obstacle, though, that the world is really waking up to, and this is a really hot topic at the moment, is grids. Because if you think about it, in the old days, we had coal-fired power stations, and the grid radiated out from that coal-fired power station to all the cities it needed to serve. Actually, what's happening now is we've got to turn the grid inside out, and we've got to collect energy from multiple sources of renewable energy, offshore and onshore. Existing transmission lines aren't in the right place. They're quite often old and have been poorly maintained, and a lot more are needed. In fact, National Grid estimated that they're going to need more over the next 5 years. They're going to need to build 5 times more transmission lines than they have in the last 30 years. And this isn't just a problem in the UK, it's a problem everywhere. And it's a big problem in the UK because guess where the windiest place of the UK is up here in Scotland. Yet a lot of the power gets used down south. And you're creating all this energy and it's got to get down there. It doesn't just sort of get there on its own. But there's this huge project called the Great Grid Partnership. We've teamed up with AECOM, and we're the design and consenting partners, and we're doing technical and environmental design and preparation for all these infrastructure projects that are going to enable this massive upgrading of the grid. One of the biggest issues they're facing is NIMBYism. Are we going to tolerate these pylons marching across our landscapes to actually solve climate change? But it's not just the energy sector that's going through transformation. It's also the transport sector. And that's largely driven by more people, the need for resilience to climate change impacts, new technologies, changing lifestyles. Transport plays a really critical role within and between cities. It acts as an economic backbone, it's a social connector. It enables goods and services to flow, children to get to school, adults to work, ambulances to reach hospitals. Transport can be a catalyst for national transformation if place-based transport infrastructure is thought about in a thoughtful way. Inclusive, affordable, sustainable and resilient transport is needed everywhere. We've done work that looks at the inclusiveness of transport networks for women, for children, for old people. In short, the conclusion is that most of them have been designed by young to middle-aged men for young to middle-aged men. And that needs to change. Operators are all needing to expand their services to meet demand, but they're also trying to decarbonize, they're also dealing with climate resilience and maintenance of aging networks. But a transformation is underway. By 2030, there are going to be 30 million net zero emission cars on European roads. High-speed rail will have doubled. Zero-emission marine vessels will be market ready. Within cities, the shift to public transport is well underway, mostly driven by the net zero targets of cities. They can't meet their targets if everyone stays in cars. And public transport needs to be at the heart of urban design. 2.5 years after the Elizabeth line opened, and that's what this is a picture of, one of the escalators, 90% of the Elizabeth line passengers said it improved their local area, underscoring transport's role as a force for renewal. It's unlocked employment, earnings, population growth, and development in the surrounding areas around the station. And you can really see it, it's visible, watching places transform. Tens of thousands of homes have been built within a kilometre of the station. And that's created job opportunities which didn't exist before. And the same thing's happening in Copenhagen, where they've just given the green light for the M5, which is the new tube line. We've worked with Copenhagen previously on the M3 and the M4. The M5 will mean that the majority of their residents will be within 5 minutes walking distance from a train station. It's amazing. And they want to set new sustainable standards. And so they've challenged us to say, we want the M5 to be 50% less carbon than the M4. Well, we're doing our sums. We've got to 40%. We're working hard. We've teamed up with COE as a joint venture. We'll get to that 50%. But when you're counting carbon and trying to reduce carbon, every little bit counts. High-speed rail has become one of the fastest growing infrastructure sectors in the world. Not in this country. We're not very good at it. But in other places, that's not true. Not only does it have a critical role in transitioning to net zero and actually replacing short-haul flights, it can unlock economic benefits for the whole region. This is just a picture of what will be the Los Angeles to San Francisco Express, a journey of less than 3 hours. That's shorter than it took me to get from London this morning. And we're looking at similar high-speed routes between, say, Melbourne and Sydney. This is the future. And maybe we'll sort out the one here. And when you get to Los Angeles in your high-speed train, you're going to be able to get in an EV. Because we're working with Los Angeles, helping them accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles by using geospatial data to locate curbside charging points. The biggest obstacle to the take-up of EVs is the lack of infrastructure. And I feel that one too. I hadn't had a new car for 22 years, so I bought one at Christmas. I then applied to have my front garden turned into a parking lot, and I was going to make it geotextiles so it could absorb the rainwater. I thought it was a great idea. And I was told that it had to be 4.8 meters. deep. My car's only 4 meters deep. I haven't got one of those really huge Range Rovers. And now I can't charge my car on the curbside. I have to go to the garage where they've got the charging points. But this is serious. If you go to places like Amsterdam, there's no shortage of charging points, and there are EVs everywhere. But transport isn't just about reducing carbon and congestion and getting from A to B as fast as possible. It's about improving air quality, integrating active travel and open spaces. If any of you have been to cities like Shanghai or Delhi recently, the pollution is desperate. The World Health Organization brought out a report last year that said 99% of people are living in places where air quality exceeds WHO standards for acceptability. So we're working with lots of governments and regional governments, city governments in particular, looking at how we can promote active travel. And this is a project in Singapore. It started off as just a 21-kilometer highway project. And it turned into a project which has created open spaces and bus lanes and integrated footpaths and cycle routes, and importantly, nature. And a key part of this is creating accessibility and inclusivity for women, children, and the elderly. After all, as Ove reminded us, we're designing for people. And good transport systems can significantly improve people's lives. We're not going to make it, though, to a better world unless we sort out how we build buildings. We have to rethink buildings. We haven't got them right. In this country, there are 28 million homes. 20 million of those homes need retrofitting for energy efficiency. 10 million of those homes need retrofitting for other reasons, because they're not decent housing, because they've got a fire risk, because they're full of damp. So that's a big project. 20 million homes. We've worked it out, it'll cost 40 billion. That's the same as the Elizabeth line cost. A major infrastructure project, but much harder than the Elizabeth line because it's fragmented all around the country. But it needs to be approached as a major infrastructure project to make sure that all these houses have insulation, heat pumps instead of boilers. It's not going to happen by hoping that homeowners will apply for grants. Buildings account for 37% of greenhouse gas emissions. 26% of that is the in-use energy, the lights, the heating, the cooling. 11% is associated with the materials which are used when you build buildings. Now, that 26% is going to go down. It's going to go down because of renewable energy. Because when we're heating and cooling our buildings with renewable energy, that's going to be a lower figure. So the importance of the materials in the construction becomes higher. We've made using whole life carbon analysis to rigorously calculate all the carbon generated in a building a mainstream activity. And when I say all the carbon, that's the carbon associated with the structure, which is generally steel or concrete, the building services, the facade, the skin, the mechanical systems, and then all the stuff in the building, ceilings, carpets, etc. And you have to calculate all of that and add it up over the lifespan of the building. And if you take a lifespan of about 60 years, you find that the building services are replaced after 20 years, the facades replaced after 30 years. And actually, quite quickly, all the ductwork in the building and the outside, the skin of the building, actually has got more carbon associated within the structure. And that changes the way we design buildings. And it's possible quite easily, and we're doing it again and again and again, to halve the emissions by just making more informed design decisions based on carbon as well as costs. We're advocating for dual currency. Just as we have euros and dollars and pounds, let's just talk about everything in terms of pounds and tons of carbon per meter squared. We're also challenging convention to create the next generation of low-carbon tall buildings by doing these kinds of things. And And this is a picture in the city of a new building in the city that begins to look different to the other ones, just a little bit different. But in the Netherlands, we've actually built a high-rise with timber structure, which is as much about the fire engineering as it is about the structural engineering. And in Melbourne, Australia, this is an award-winning example of a circular building. We've taken a 1970s tall building, stripped it back to its structure, its skeleton, kept all the skeleton, 98% of the skeleton, to save the embodied energy associated with demolishing that. And then the architect came up with this very funky new form for it. And that building has now got a new life. I don't call this retrofitting. I don't call it repurposing. I call it rejuvenation. But it's not just buildings, it's factories. We've been working with Pepsi in Poland. And this is their largest and greenest production facility in the whole of Europe. And we're increasingly courting data center companies. Data centers have become critical infrastructure. We can't live without data. And actually, data is important because if we use the data right, we can understand our world better. The scientists can understand our world better, and that will help us shape a better world. But data centers haven't got a reputation for being good neighbors. And so we're working with data center companies, engaging with local communities, and working out how can this be a win for the local community. This is how you stop NIMBYism. And so this project, which is in Spain, will actually enhance the environment. It will be nature positive and improve the lives of local people by creating this really big open park. We're bringing nature into cities around the world. It's called blue-green infrastructure to distinguish it from the grey infrastructure, the concrete and the steel. And we're doing it at scale. In Shanghai, there was a competition. They wanted a new urban stormwater master plan. And so we pitched for this using Earth observation data to be able to analyze a city of this scale using that Earth observation data and treat it like a sponge and understand how every square meter of the city, how porous is it? Can it actually soak up water? And what's the topography? How will the runoff work? And we're using Earth observation data more and more combined with on-the-ground engineering to really create new and exciting and innovative solutions, but at scale. And I've realized that actually the difference is the resolution of the Earth observation data. If you've got a newish iPhone, or certainly the new iPhone, and you take pictures of stars, they're almost as good as the BBC's pictures of the stars. And it's the same the other way around. You can get the Earth observation data now, and you can measure biodiversity on the planet. That's the level of resolution. That's awesome in terms of our ability to understand our world. In Albania, we're bringing nature into the city by creating a business case for planting 2 million trees in an orbital forest. And it's trying to be a green belt to stop the urban sprawl, but it's also creating a vital lung for the city to clean up the air, which is really not good at the moment, to absorb carbon, to reduce flooding. And so there's a very strong business case for the value associated with those 2 million trees. And we just won this project in Singapore, which is using that Earth observation data to be able to understand the health of trees across the city, starting with 7,500 trees. And those of you who have been to Singapore, they're absolutely beautiful, and they are vital for the future of the city because they're going to provide incredibly important shading as the temperatures get hotter. And a bit closer to home, or closer to my home, down in the Fens, which is the breadbasket of the UK, we're actually looking right out to 2100 to see how can we keep the Fens as viable agricultural land. A lot of it is already flooded on a regular basis, and it's hugely vulnerable to sea level rise. As a firm, we're also trying to make sure that we reach our net zero targets. And at some point, we've achieved a 30% reduction in our emissions over the last 5 years. And we've set a target to be net zero by 2040. But we're not going to be able to reduce all our emissions. And so at some point, we've got to offset those emissions. And we've been really thinking hard about that for about 3 years. How do we do this in a meaningful way that actually also shapes a better world? And 2 weeks ago, we made an agreement with Boothby Wildland. And this is a piece of land in Lincolnshire. You only have to look at it to realize that it's highly degraded. It's not very productive. And they are going to rewild it, initially with soil and shrubs, and then later with trees, which is the sort of state-of-the-art of rewilding. And we've put £1 million on the table to enable them to get this project going. And that will enable us to have carbon credits in the future as those trees grow. So, my message to you all is the future is ours to create. For us, for our children, for our children's children, and for future generations. And it starts now. This is the roadmap. When I started my career, we were right on the left-hand side of this picture. Design was conventional design. We didn't think about the environment, and we didn't think very much about people. We worried about safety. We certainly didn't worry about resilience or regeneration. Where are we now? Probably somewhere between the green and the sustainable. We need to move quicker. We need to get to net zero fast. The decisions we make and the actions we take over the next few years will determine the future for generations to come. We cannot ignore the near-term challenges which are currently dominated by political instability, changing work patterns following COVID, geopolitical tensions, the war in Ukraine and Gaza, inflation, the cost of living. It's easy to get wrapped up in all of those things. But we can't afford to take our eye off the ball and ignore the very significant risks posed by climate change, nature loss, and inequity. Our planet is unwell, and we must seize the opportunities transitioning to a green economy represents over the next 1, 3, 10, 30 years. That's what we mean by shaping a better world. Thank you.